Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And Winton, thank you for pulling this opportunity together to talk about our shared priorities. On behalf of the Food System Caucus co-chairs, including Senators Comerford, Goby, and Lesser, and Reps Donahue and Schmidt and myself, we wanted to just start off by reminding people what our past year priorities have been. This is the fourth time the Food System Caucus collectively is going to be advocating for budget items together. We started in fiscal year 20, and you can see that some of our priorities have remained constant, HIP and MEFAP, and some things have changed over time depending on what is going on. And certainly part of that was greatly influenced by COVID and the issues that we were facing. So next slide, perhaps, Winton. So this year, the Food System Caucus, the co-chairs sent a letter to both Ways and Means chairs outlining the following top priorities. And these were driven, again, as we do things in this caucus, through a consensus, reaching out to our members on a survey for their top priorities. And the things that continue to be of greatest importance to us in advocacy, the Healthy Incentives Program, we're looking for $20 million this year, which again, hopefully we have a period of time in which people are able to access easily getting out to food markets and are able to use their incentives. We also are hoping for some additional growth in the program, more vendors covering more of the geography across Massachusetts. And then the MEFAP, again, looking for $30 million. As all of you know, we have not seen the decrease in food insecurity happening, and we think it's very important that we still have this level of access and support for folks. We're again asking for funds for UMass Extension. The critical role that they play in our food system is something that we as a caucus continue to highlight and to press and advocate for. And this year, for the first time, looking for funding for the local food policy councils, and something that we think is probably, for those of us involved in the food system, we're aware of the role of local food policy councils. But I think it has been something that has largely been under the radar screen of many involved in the budget advocacy, and we want to raise that as an issue in this budget cycle. And then next, please, Winton. We also are supporting the following statewide budget requests. Again, things that we've been advocating for in many different ways over time. But certainly these are issues in which we think it's critical that the funding levels that we're seeking, which is based on the input and advocacy of all of you involved in the food system, are levels at which we need to see coming out of our budget. And so we, again, in our letter to the House Ways and Means and the Senate Ways and Means chairs, advocated for the funding that you see here, as well as the language for Mass in Motion. You will see the Food System Caucus. We advocate diversely for our priorities. So there are different members who will be carrying these budget amendments if needed in the process. And we're very much, hoping that with your work that we can all jointly advocate successfully to get to these levels. And I'm very interested in hearing what all of you have to say today and finding more ways in which we as a caucus can support the great work that you do each and every day. So thank you, Winton, for letting us start off.
Thank you, Rep. Kane. So I want to start off by just a simple spreadsheet. These are all of the asks that you're going to hear about this morning. This is available on our website, as well as in our letter that's been circulated, as well as in the caucus letter that's been circulated. But just so you can get a sense of scale and scope, this is to put it all in one place. And I'll add that this session is being recorded, and we'll circulate it to all legislators a little bit later in the week for those who weren't able to be here. So I'm going to start out with the collaboratives asks this morning. And I'll start out by saying that all of our requests are in service to two commitments from the state. The state has talked a lot over the last few years about both food security and climate resilience, and all of these asks are directly in support of those needs for the state. And so, as Representative Kane just discussed, our top priority continues to be the Healthy Incentives Program. This program has been a roaring success for the state over the last 5 years, growing every year and meeting some really important needs for low-income families to be able to access fresh, healthy local food. And every dollar that they spend through the program goes right back to Massachusetts farmers, who then in turn create jobs, purchase local goods and services, and help to steward natural resources. So we're asking for $20 million this year so that the program can continue to grow by meeting the needs of the unfortunately growing number of SNAP recipients in the state. Also by opening up more opportunities for farmers in parts of the state that are currently underserved by the program. And 2021 was a big success in that the program wasn't suspended all year for the first time since it began, and we want to see that continue as well, obviously. UMass Extension, this is the second year that we've asked for resources for extension. It's about half of what we asked for last year in the hopes that a smaller ask might find more favor in the legislature. UMass Extension has been around since 1911. Providing science-based and objective research and education to farmers around the state. It's as farms, the number of farms in the state has grown in recent years. The resources that UMass Extension gets has actually shrunk. And so there's a real need for more resources for their programs. So this would provide 4 staff members, one to work on integrated pest management, which means using fewer pesticides that would get into our air and water in the state. One for pollinators. We're all aware of the declining bee population and the challenges that means for growers. So an extension educator to focus exclusively on pollinators. Another one to work in the soil labs. The state has done a lot of really great work on soils recently, including some new requirements on farmers that involve testing and understanding what soil health means. And so this would provide resources for an educator there. And then finally, a new staff member to focus on urban agriculture, which is one of the fastest growing sectors of agriculture in the state. So $620,000 for UMass Extension. Next, as Rep. Kane mentioned, local food policy councils are scattered throughout the state. There's about 24 of them. These are networks of local organizations that work on all aspects of the food system, ranging from agriculture to food pantries, to distributors, to restaurants. And they really proved their worth during the pandemic, and that they did some essential work in making sure that residents of their communities were fed, had access to food throughout the pandemic, despite all of the supply chain challenges that were going on, and really helped to make sure that a lot of food businesses stayed in business as well. So we're asking for $250,000 that would be administered as a grant program through MDAR, and this is a new ask this year. Food Security Infrastructure Grants. This is a program that was stood up in 2020 by the administration and the legislature to provide capital grants to the food system at a time when we all remember the crises that were going on then. The capital needs that are met range from tractors and cultivation equipment for farmers, to refrigeration for food pantries, to food preparation equipment for schools. The program has so far had 2 rounds, one of $36 million and one of $15 million, and has been tremendously oversubscribed. It's only been able to meet about 17% of the demand. And so we're asking for $30 million for this program to continue to find opportunities to support the local food system. And our final ask is for $300,000 additional funds for staffing for the Department of Agricultural Resources. The department has had an incredible increase on demand for them, not just because of the growing number of farms, but obviously because of the pandemic and the challenges that came with the interruptions to the food supply chain. Also, a lot of money coming in through USDA that has to be administered. The FSIG program also is a new program that it's great that we're getting that money out there, but we did not increase any sort of support for the agency that has to administer the program. And so as a result, there's a lot more contracts that have to be dealt with. There's more land stewardship, there's more communications, and the department really needs more resources in order to staff all of these great new programs. So we're asking for $300,000 for that. So that is the 5 priorities from the Mass Food System Collaborative. I am going to turn it over to a colleague next, and that's going to be Kelly Coleman. Kelly's from CISA and is representing the buy locals this morning.
Morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We really cannot do the work we do without the support of the legislature. And so I really thank the Food Caucus for stepping up and being a strong advocate. I want to talk mostly about the $750,000 request for the buy local campaigns. There are 9 buy local organizations that work across the state. And although each of our organizations does things slightly differently to match the needs of our individual regions, all of us engage in similar types of work. So we all across the state work to increase consumer awareness and demand for locally grown food. We do outreach directly to the public, marketing and education to make sure that people know where, why, and how to buy local food. We engage the community directly to support local agriculture, inviting members to support policy change on behalf of farms and agriculture, as well as to learn about the bigger issues that are impacting local agriculture. We directly support farmers through technical assistance and training related to their farming and farm businesses. And we work to support increased access to local food by supporting the Healthy Incentives Program, which Winton just spoke about, and as well as providing some training and support to farmers so that they can process HIP and make sure that their community knows that they're an access point. Funding for the buy local campaigns has been part of the state budget for over 15 years, and this consistent commitment of support has been essential in strengthening the local food economy across the state. National research has suggested that when there's a buy local campaign in a region, that local businesses see more robust sales, even during times of economic weakness. Our work promoting local agriculture to our local communities does mean that more consumers recognize the value and the importance of farmers and of buying local. And we saw this during the pandemic as supply chains and food options were disrupted. Farms often stepped up into that gap, providing ordering, delivery, curbside pickup, pivoting quickly to make sure that our local community could get access to fresh local food, and consumers were eager for that opportunity. And many of the buy locals stepped in to help farms and community members know how to make those connections. Farms were saying that there was significant increase in demand during the height of the pandemic. Since other options have become available, that demand has slipped some, and it's vitally important that we continue to reach out to consumers to make sure that they know that farms were there for them during the pandemic and need their support. And that funding from the state helps us in doing that outreach. CISA and our partners have crunched some of the numbers, and we've been able to demonstrate that if every household in the state shifted just $5 of their food budget towards local, then that would result in nearly $80 million in additional money circulated in the local economy, over 1,500 jobs, and better health with over 250 million servings of fresh local being available. I appreciate the Food Caucus and the Mass Food System Collaborative, both including this $750,000 in the budget request. Look forward to your support as the budget moves forward this week. That, of course, is in line item 25110-100, and we really appreciate that support. With the last 30 seconds or so, I do want to put a pitch in for another item that was on both lists. There was a $75,000 request for the Senior Farm Share Program. That is a program that provides seniors, low-income seniors in the region, primarily in Western Massachusetts, with access to fresh local food directly from farmers. Over 500 seniors receive a mini CSA share. That's a weekly distribution of foods provided directly to senior centers or their senior housing sites, and increases the availability and access of local food directly to seniors with low incomes. And that is a $75,000 request in the Department of Elder Affairs. Again, I want to thank you all for your support in the past. We really can't do this without the support of the state, and look forward to your support this budget cycle. Thanks, Winton.
Thank you, Kelly. Next up is Jennifer Lemmerman from Project Bread.
Good morning. Thanks so much, Winton and the Mass Food System Collaborative for including us here today. We appreciate being here, and thank you to the Food Systems Caucus for including several of these in your letter and your just ongoing support over the years. We really appreciate it. So I'm Jen Lemmerman. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy at Project Bread, and we'll talk to you today about our 4 budget requests, 2 of which deal directly with school meals and access for students in the schools, and 2 are Project Bread programs that have had ongoing support in the state budget over the years. So the first is our big one. I can lead off with that one, and that is to extend universal school meals for all in the coming school year, the 22-23 school year. We're in a situation right now, I think many of you know, that as Rep. Kane mentioned in the beginning, food insecurity has not recovered, and in fact is back on the rise right now in the course of the pandemic. After peaking early in the pandemic, it did go down as pandemic-related programs kicked in. And while those are now cycling off, we're seeing the direct impact on food insecurity rates, which are going back up. So the need is still very much there. However, many of these programs are ending. And one of those is the Universal School Meals Program that was provided federally. That will end on June 30th. And it has become very clear in recent weeks that Congress is unable to overcome their sort of internal politics around this issue and have not been able to extend it. So we have every reason to expect that as of July 1, this program will end, and that students who have had 2 years of universal school meals will lose access to that program. So we're asking the state to provide a glide path for those families. This was the #1 source of free food to families during the pandemic, the school meal sites, and then when they made their way back into the building, getting meals while they were at school. There will be 400,000 children in Massachusetts who will no longer have access to free school meals as of July 1 without action. And we saw the results of this, 40% increase in school meal participation in schools that were not providing universal school meals already. And then the reduced administrative burden on schools, as well as families. But we're hearing from schools across the state that are operating in the black for the first time, and are directing those funds to things like school social workers that are so critical during this time, and really being able to invest, with having this support available. So students, schools, their families, the entire community have benefited from this program. And we ask the legislature to continue it through the budget process. The other piece is a longer term request. We're asking this as an outside section, and asking that Massachusetts joins the other 13 states in the country so far that have eliminated the reduced price category. As you know, we have 3 categories for kids and school meals. They either get a free meal, they pay a copay, or they pay the full price. The majority of meal debt comes from this category or kids close to this category. These are families that are in need. We would see up to 20,000 students having access to free school meals if we were to eliminate this category. We know that it will increase participation in school meals and bring this program that has been really critical in the long term to more kids. The next 2 are the Project Bread programs that we are so appreciative of the support of over the years. The Child Nutrition Outreach Program is our program that works directly with schools and meal sites in the summer to make sure that kids have meals and have food where they're at. This year, after doing the COVID response and providing technical assistance to the meal sites, throughout the pandemic and to the schools as they reopened, we will continue that work. We are adding additional staff so we can cover more communities. We're also working alongside DESE, who is our contracted partner on this program, to do a full rebrand of both school and summer meals in order to reach more kids and increase participation. Finally, we are asking for an increase in support. I'm sorry, the Child Nutrition Outreach Program was 700,000 was the request. And the Food Source Hotline, we're requesting 850,000. This is our toll-free, completely confidential information and referral line. We can answer calls in 180 different languages. We're reaching for 1,000 SNAP pre-screens this month. We will be adding bilingual counselors so that we can answer calls directly and bypass the language line in several more languages. And we are introducing technology options that make it more accessible, such as texting. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions after today on any of these items. Thanks, Winton.
Thanks, Jen. And we are going to have time for questions after all the speakers this morning. Next up, Mass Farm to School, Lisa Damon.
Thanks, Winton, and thanks to the collaborative for inviting us here today. And also thanks to the caucus for joining us this morning. So Massachusetts Farm to School is a statewide organization that strengthens farms and fisheries and promotes healthy communities across Massachusetts by increasing local food purchasing and education at schools. We're excited to say we're an organization that has worked statewide for almost 20 years now. We work across the state to support communities doing farm to school work through network building, professional development, technical assistance, and then also statewide policy advocacy. I want to thank the legislator and especially the caucus for their continued support of farm to school programs. We have been fortunate enough to work closely with many offices throughout the legislature for a number of years and really appreciate the ongoing and continued support of farm to school programs throughout the Commonwealth, and the recognition that they're critical programs happening in schools, communities, in communities across the state. Can look very different from community to community, but really provides an integral part of education, nutrition, and economic development really across the Commonwealth. We're excited to say, we have close relationship with legislators and have been fortunate enough to receive funding from through the budget process for a number of years and hope to do so again, so we can provide some of our critical programming to the programs throughout Massachusetts. This past year, we are excited to work with legislators to receive from funding through the COVID recovery budget process to establish and pilot a farm to school grant program here in Massachusetts. And Mass Farm to School, along with a few other organizations, are working closely with Department of Ed to really get that program underway. And now more than ever, recognize the need for technical assistance and support as schools kind of ramp up to take advantage of that federal funding. And so hopefully we can really roll out our technical assistance and professional development this year to leverage those available funding sources through the federal government and expand and start up farm to school programming more than ever across the state. And really, it's been a critical part of the COVID recovery process that we've heard from schools and producers, and we hope that continues as in the coming years. So we're asking for level funding through the Department of Agricultural Resources of $120,000 to continue our programming and support schools and producers across the state. And I'm happy to take questions when appropriate. Thanks, Winton.
Thank you, Lisa. Next up is MEFAP, and on behalf of the food banks, Catherine Lynn from the Greater Boston Food Bank.
Winton, and thank you to the collaborative and the legislative caucus and Rep. Kane for hosting this morning's presentation. I'm Catherine Lynn. I'm from the Greater Boston Food Bank. As Winton said, I'm speaking on behalf of the 4 food banks. And as a reminder, Merrimack Valley Food Bank, Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, the Greater Boston Food Bank, and Worcester County Food Bank make up the Food Bank Coalition of Massachusetts. And together we are serving nearly every community across the state through about 1,000 pantries, meal programs, and mobile markets. I think it goes without saying that we are supportive of almost all of the budget requests this morning, but want to speak to you specifically about the Massachusetts Emergency Food Assistance Program, MEFAP, which we're requesting level funding at $30 million. Appreciate the caucus for their request on this. This is the state line item that provides funding to the 4 food banks to purchase food for distribution to those 1,000 pantry meal programs, shelters across the state. The food bank, Greater Boston Food Bank, manages this contract with MDAR, and we work with all the food banks to do all the food purchasing on behalf of the state. Last year, the food banks served an average of about 831,000 clients per month. That's on average, although the number of people receiving food assistance did decrease in some areas across the state, while increased in others. It's been a little bit of a yo-yo throughout the year as different benefits have stopped and started. But I think the important thing to note is that the total number across the state is still higher than pre-pandemic, and in recent months has increased in certain areas. For example, in Eastern Massachusetts, we serve about 70% of the state's population. We saw a 60% increase in June 2020. That has not subsided at all. And in fact, in the recent months, as I just said, we've been hearing anecdotally from agencies that the high cost of food is really driving more clients to either new clients or clients that had left and then are now back and returning. MFAP is just so a little bit about MFAP. So it's a critical source of food that stabilizes our food supply. It's not the only source of food, but it's a big portion. And a portion of this program also helps to support local industries. And some fast facts from last year. So if you remember, and we're really so appreciative that the program was boosted about $10 million in FY20, and we were able to do a lot with that. So last year, 47% of the MFAP vendors were mass-based, whether manufacturers, vendors, or agricultural, and 39% of those funds were spent locally. Our mass-grown purchasing did increase by 53%. And we provided a total of 163 different core food items, and through mass grown, about 77 different types of fresh produce, poultry, dairy items were provided through MFAP. We did also add 2 new local seafood vendors, the Cape Cod Fishermen's Association and Boston Sword and Tuna, spent about $600,000 with those 2 new contracts and have increased for this current fiscal year in FY21. And then so just in total, a total of about 35 million pounds, or the equivalent about 29 million meals were provided statewide. That's about a 25% increase, and a total of 7 million more meals as a result of that $10 million support. So I think I want to just close by just sharing, I think, 2 really important points that just want to underscore, and they've been sort of mentioned already a couple of times. But I think the number one thing is the food bank system is a critical piece of addressing food insecurity, but it must work in concert with all of these other federal and assistance programs. When one program ends, another one has to step up, or there's more additional pressure. So I think I want to just commend the amazing food pantry meal program shelter workers, because they have stepped up and they are resilient, but they are tired. And I think that when we look at some of these SNAP and school meals, as Jen just mentioned, and the possible expiration of these programs, that means more pressure on our emergency food bank system. And so we are concerned about that. And the reason we are not asking for more than $30 million is because of capacity across the food bank network. So we are steadfast in asking for 30 million, and it's going to be critical and very helpful, but we are very concerned about these other benefits and how they're going to impact our clients. And then the last piece I just want to mention is that, we all are seeing the news. We're all feeling it ourselves of the increased cost in food and gas and utility prices. And we are feeling that in a big way. On average, our food costs are increased about 11% right now. Gas is up as well. We've got a whole fleet of trucks that are delivering that food all across the state. And so not only are we feeling it in our operations, but of course our clients are also feeling it. And I don't know if any of my food bank colleagues are on the call. I know that I've heard anecdotally from a lot of our agencies. I know I just spoke to and heard from Christina Maxwell from the Food Bank of Western Mass, and she had shared anecdotally that they have clients that rural population can't even put gas in their car to go and get to the pantry and pick up food. And so these are just some examples. So all of the support that makes MFAP so much more important. It's such a critical staple of our food supply. And I should just also mention that, fundraising is declining, and we are declining and seeing TFAP USDA foods declining. So again, MFAP is just that staple, consistent supply in our network. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And to talk about the Mass Food Trust and Mass in Motion, Christina Kamani from MPHA.
Thanks, Winton. Thanks, Rep. Kane and all the caucus members for having me today, and really appreciate all of your support on both the Mass Food Trust program and Mass in Motion over the years. So I'll just give a brief summary of each program and then what our current fiscal year ask is. So the Massachusetts Food Trust program's goals are to increase access to healthy, affordable food, as well as jobs in low and moderate income communities. The program does this by providing loans, grants, and business assistance to either new or expanding healthy food retailers and local food enterprises. This program was started with seed funding from the Baker-Polito administration in 2018 and in partnership with the Massachusetts Department of Ag Resources. And the program is really committed to improving food security and access throughout the Commonwealth. So some fun, fast facts. To date, the Food Trust has provided funding to 48 projects across 10 counties. It's created more than 678 jobs and increased access to healthy food for over 225,000 people. The Food Trust also, through its kind of innovative public-private partnership model, has been able to leverage more than $11 million in project investment. And I think another innovative gap that it was able to fill throughout the pandemic is with the food security infrastructure grants, because so many smaller organizations and businesses don't always have that capital, upfront, and those grants were a reimbursement model. The Food Trust program was able to step in and provide no interest loans to some of those projects so that they had the capital they needed for whatever it was, and then were able to get reimbursed from that food security grant later on. So this year we're just asking for level funding, which is $300,000 in the FY23 budget. And this funding provides the operating dollars to the two CDFIs, or the Community Development Financial Institutions, that actually run the Food Trust program. And those are the Local Enterprise Assistance Fund and the Franklin County Community Development Corporation. Mass in Motion. So this is a Mass Department of Public Health program, which funds communities and regions across the Commonwealth to address root causes of preventable chronic conditions by promoting equity and the social determinants of health. So MIM grantees accomplish their work through cross-sector collaborations that create opportunities for safe physical activity and healthy and affordable food access. So to date, Mass in Motion has been able to make positive changes in over 70 communities, cities, towns, and neighborhoods in Massachusetts. The program has also been able to leverage over $18 million in funding to improve health through projects like adopting zoning and regulations, to support community agriculture, and implementing things like safe routes to school initiatives, so that infrastructure and policies at the local level can support walking and biking to and from school. In FY23, the program is going to shift its model a little bit and start to support fewer communities, but there's going to be a greater investment in those communities so it can allow for greater impact. So what we're asking for in the FY23 budget is that the legislature just maintain language around funding for the program, which has been in previous budgets. And so this language just ensures that the program receives no less funding than it did in the previous fiscal year. So thank you again for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Christina. And I'll just add, as Christina mentioned, the funding formula for Mass in Motion has changed, and that's part of the impetus for the request for Food Policy Council grant program that I mentioned earlier. There's a good deal of overlap between Mass in Motion groups and local food policy councils, and those grants would help some of those folks that are no longer receiving Mass in Motion funds. So that's the end of our presentations. I'm going to ask the five speakers to put your email addresses in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing as well so that I can see everybody and give attendees a chance to ask questions. You can put your hand up, you can take yourself off mute and just shout out your questions, whatever works. I'm not seeing any hands. Any questions from anybody for any of our speakers? All right, well, you've got all of our contact information there in the chat, and we really appreciate you being here to listen. We're going to post this on YouTube later in the day, and we'll share it around. So those of you that weren't able to for those your colleagues that weren't able to be here, they'll be able to see it. With that, we will sign off. Have a great